Oh, yeah, please. Thank you. Am I allowed to move around, or do I need to stand right here? Does it matter?
Yeah, you'll have to stand still for them to hear everything.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. Well, then I'll stand here. We've been over here. I came over on Monday night and to spray some plots yesterday morning, and we spent the day in Midville yesterday looking at cotton. And this has become one of my favorite times of the year, to come over here in East Georgia and spend time walking cotton with a lot of our producer leadership and extension agents and folks like that, and to be here as part of this meeting. And so I really do enjoy this time of year. Okay, a couple things real quick. I do always like to share the ways that we are getting information out there, okay, and this is one of them. I hope that people are aware of it. I shared the QR codes at county meetings this year. Of course, these are the same ones again. The Talking Cotton podcast, we do it every other week throughout the growing season. You know, the Peanut Boys did start in the podcast game before we did. But we try to do things a little bit different. The Cotton Group does. If you listen to the Peanut one, you know, good for you, right? They do it once a week, but they like to cut up a lot, and you know, I kind of struggle to listen to it. I'll just be honest with you. So, you know, I'm just going to be honest. All right, so we try to keep it every other week, right, so that we're not saying the same thing over and over again. But also, man, some people really, y'all must listen to the podcast, okay, because it does seem like that. But we try to discuss new stuff every other week, and try to keep it pretty tight in terms of information. I don't want to waste y'all's time. I don't want to waste our time, right? So y'all got stuff to do, okay? So anyways, just another way of sharing information. Of course, we do get to complaining a little bit about our sprayer being broke down, right? But that's just part of life, okay? But other than that, I feel like we do a good job staying on task. Now, another thing that has actually happened this year, I took over the Cotton Specialist Corner podcast, which is something a little different. That's sponsored by Cotton Incorporated, and certainly do appreciate them for that. And that's, of course, more your checkoff dollars, right, coming back to the University of Georgia. This is a little bit more of a belt-wide type podcast, and try to do some things that are really relevant to the entire industry itself. Of course, me and Taylor spend a lot of time together in the wintertime. We talk every day, by the way, me and Taylor do. We've gotten to be good friends. But, you know, in the wintertime, I heard a spiel about microplastics 47 times, okay? And so I learned about microplastics, all right? And then I started digging into it myself, and you know, it's really kind of frightening. I mean, once you start digging into it, a lot of the research is coming out saying that stuff can affect photosynthesis in plants. Like, plants can take it up. Those things are crossing the blood-brain barrier. Like, I mean, it's stuff like that. I mean, it's very alarming. And so one thing that we did was actually did a podcast on microplastics, the Cotton Specialist Corner podcast. And so I really enjoyed doing that one. And of course, I was on the phone with a grower the other day, and he asked me, he was like, well, what's the market going to do? And I was like, I'm not the person to call for that, okay? But I told him, I said, I swear to you, I'm doing everything I can. And he said, what do you mean? And so on this podcast, the last 3 episodes were crop updates from across the Cotton Belt, okay? And I got all my friends on there across the Cotton Belt, and they all got to pour mouthing real bad, okay? Everybody likes to pour mouth. And so I said, man, these guys are all pour mouthing. We're going to get to the southeast. I'm going to tell them we're going to make us a crop over here, you know? And so I'm doing everything I can to try to get the market to respond to something, all right? So by having all my friends talk about how bad the crop is over there, and all that good stuff. But anyways, it's a good time, and I do encourage y'all to listen to that one as well. I would be remiss if I did not mention Miss Sarah Hobby. She works for Dr. Roberts, but she's helped us out with both of these podcasts, and does a really, really good job, in my opinion. And she's going to be doing that for us for a while. Another event that I wanted to share with you guys while I was up here, while we're in this part of the state, August 6th at 9 a.m. in Midville. Be there, all right? It's one of my favorite field days, to go to on the experiment stations. Please be sure to register. It's a good opportunity. Of course, that's in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. Yeah, so, a lot can change in 2 weeks, right? I'm going to tell you a little bit about the crop and kind of what I'm seeing out there right now, but in 2 weeks, it can change. And so I do encourage everybody to come to the Midville Field Day. It's just down the road from here. A great opportunity to come, ask more questions, interact with us in the field, see some of our plots if you're interested in that. But please do register for that if you plan on attending, just so that the crew over there in Midville can get a good head count for lunch, okay? That okay? Y'all good with that? All right, cool. All right. So 1 year can change a lot, okay? 1 year can change a lot. Of course, there's a lot of things that have changed in the industry, and Taylor brought that up. But, I went and I took this picture. I think it was on Monday. I went and I took this picture, and in this field, there's probably not many people that know the significance of this field that I'm standing in this picture, okay? It's on the Animal Science Farm in Tifton, and I planted it on May the 15th, okay? And I was on the tractor planting this cotton, and my wife called me, and she was very pregnant, like real pregnant, okay? And she called me and she said, hey, I've got to go to the doctor today, like something's going on. And I said, okay, well, just keep me in the loop. She was like, I don't think anything crazy is happening, but I said, all right, just keep me in the loop. And about 2 o'clock that afternoon, I was back out there trying to finish up planting the rest of the farm, and she called me. She said, you better come home because we're going to the hospital in 2 hours. I said, yes, ma'am. And so that was on May the 15th, and on May the 16th, we had our second. And so that's why that field is important to me, because it was the day that we went to the hospital to have our second little boy. And so been a big year for us for sure at our house. But really thinking about the season in terms of 2025, it's been a challenge. I mean, it has been. And back in May, about Mother's Day is when it all started, kind of changing for us. Before Mother's Day, it seemed like the year was going to rock along pretty normal. But Mother's Day certainly changed some things for some folks. And the story of the year by far has been the rain that we've gotten, especially in this part of the state, right? I mean, it certainly pushed a lot of cotton back. It seems like we are way behind. I mean, it feels that way, and I'm gonna show some data as to why maybe that might change your opinion a little bit. Some of that growing degree days and things like that. But it didn't just rain here, Dr. Roberts. It didn't just rain here. It rained everywhere, right? It was raining all over the state, and a good example of that is in this picture right here. And if you can see. And that one on the left side, there's an open cab tractor planting cotton in the pouring rain, okay, in Tifton, Georgia on June 11th. Dr. Philip Roberts is driving that open cab tractor, okay. We were sitting there and it started building around us, and I had to go take our firstborn to swimming lessons. And we talked, and I told Philip, I said, man, I really think we need to finish today. And he said, it's not supposed to rain, is it? I said, he said, is it going to rain tomorrow? I said, Philip, it might rain right now. I said, hey, you don't ever know. And I mean, at that time, it was just kind of building. We weren't seeing much. And so they kept going. I took my firstborn swimming lessons, and then Trey Davis sent me that picture, and I said, oh God, like I'm never going to live this one down, But I mean, we got 3/4 of an inch in about 30 minutes. Is that about right, Dr. Roberts? So I mean, it wasn't just over here. It didn't just happen in North Georgia, John, or Lee. It happened everywhere. Okay, I mean, this stuff is happening all over the state. So I went back actually and started thinking about this talk. I think it was last week is whenever I started kind of getting my thoughts together on what I was going to talk about. And I looked back at my talk from 2023. That was the first time we were over here in this part of the state, okay? And I remember coming over here and talking about delayed maturity. I remember 2023, we had a lot of rainfall during planting time, and really it was very cool in 2023. So it was certainly a challenging year in terms of getting a crop in and things like that. But I pulled some rainfall data from the UGA Weather Network from May 15th to July 15th across southeast Georgia. So Alma, Baxley, Douglas, Glenville, Midville, Odom, Statesboro, Tennille, and Vidalia. Okay, the red bars are 2023 and the black bars are this year. Okay, and really overall it's very similar in terms of rainfall that we have gotten this year in that 2-month time span. Okay, some are kind of reversed, and where we had more in 2023, and some certainly we had more in 2025. But overall, rainfall has been fairly similar. Now, I mean, there are certainly pockets. These weather stations are in one spot. Okay, there are pockets where it has rained a lot, and I understand that. Okay, I've been to some of those spots. I've seen the cotton in some of those spots where it just ain't right. You know, I mean, cotton does not like these wet feet that it's got in a lot of situations. But, you know, I did want to point out that even though the rainfall patterns have been similar to 2023, this year is different, okay? And I already mentioned it, but in 2023, we were abnormally cool during that 2-month time span, okay? But this year, that has not been the case. Okay, so I went to the same weather stations and I calculated growing degree days. Everybody know what a growing degree day is? It's just a measure of cotton growth based on temperature. Okay, cotton doesn't grow much whenever the temperature is below 60 degrees, and it doesn't grow any faster when the temperature is above 94 degrees. Okay, and so using that, we can calculate growing degree days and predict cotton growth based on temperature. Everybody understand what I'm getting at? So I looked at growing degree days for cotton that was planted on May 15th, and overall we are ahead of 2023, okay, for stuff that was planted on May 15th, okay? Now, May 15th is about whenever it started getting wet, so there probably aren't many people here who have some cotton that was planted on May 15th, okay? Y'all with me on that? Some people probably planted in June, okay, probably later in June than you wanted to. This is June 1st planted cotton. Still ahead of 2023, okay, by a few degree days, okay? Now, some people planted later than June 1st. Everybody with me? I drove by a field yesterday. It looked like it had to have been planted July 1st, okay? But we'll talk a little bit about June 15th, because that's the day, right? That's the day it was all planted, even if it looked like it was planted July 1st. Y'all get what I'm saying? All right, there we go. So, still ahead if it was planted June 15th, okay? So at the end of the day, we're ahead of where we were 2 years ago, okay? 167 degree days ahead if you planted May 15th, 68 if you planted June 1st, and 32 if you planted June 15th. And yes, I know that it has rained a lot this year, okay? But overall, I would say the cotton that I've seen looks good, okay? I've talked to a lot of people in the last week, especially people from over here, and I think we got potential to make a hell of a crop. I'll just be honest with you. I mean, it looks good. Okay, so we got us a long way to go. Somebody told me just before we walked in here, said, man, we got a long way to go, and I said some people would say we're just getting started. Okay, so I mean, we got a long way to go to make this crop, but the potential looks good. Okay, and these degree days, they matter. Okay, they matter because of October. Okay, we're going to need us a good one. We're going to need a good fall to finish this one out. Okay, and so, you know, this June planted cotton is far enough ahead to equal 5 to 10 days in October, and that is a big deal. That is a big deal to get that far ahead. Okay, now I showed a lot of data, but really the crop progress report from USDA is showing the same thing that this data that I showed is talking about. Okay. So the solid line are 2025, and then the dotted lines are previous years. And really, you know, yes, we were just below the average in terms of planted acres, but whenever you go and you start looking at percent of the crop that's squaring and setting bolls, it's ahead of the average, ahead of the 5-year average. And so, I mean, this crop potentially, if it stays like this, we could start tracking ahead of schedule. Okay, well, I would say we're right on time as it is right now, but it could change and we could get ahead of schedule. Okay, now I talked a lot about June cotton. I understand there's a lot of people that planted June cotton this year, that may not normally do that. You might be accustomed to it. Dr. Roberts and I talk about it all the time. You can still make really good cotton that's planted in the month of June, okay? Last year we had some planted in June that averaged 3 bales in our plots. And so, real world, that's 1,400 pounds, okay? So you can make cotton that's planted in June. There ain't a doubt in my mind. But this year we're going to have to be real intentional about it, especially some of that stuff that was planted middle of June, okay? We're going to have to watch some of our stuff. And two, with the situation we're in, it makes it a little bit easier, right? We kind of want to back off our inputs a little bit, and so there's some things that we can do to kind of help this crop along. As I mentioned earlier, we knew going into 2025 what the situation was going to be with cotton, okay? And so we kind of got backed into a corner to a certain extent, and so we got to make it work. We got to make it work this year. And so what's going to be the key to doing that? And I think the key is being realistic. Okay, we have got to be realistic. Yes, you can make 3 bale if you plant it in the month of June, but you guys, growers, all right, know what your fields are capable of. Okay, you know what you've made in these fields in the past. Okay, I was talking to a grower last night. I'm trying to learn how to grow cotton on sorry land. Okay. And because we've got some sorry land on the experiment station, okay, and I'm trying to learn how to do it myself. And so there's some unconventional things that you might do on that sorry land, and if it works, then do it, okay? But, I'm going to talk about some things like, let's just say, for example, something like humic acid, okay? I would not tell people to use that, but if you use it and are convinced that it works for you, then hey, by all means, okay? I can't get a response from the stuff, okay? Or microbial products or whatever it is, okay? Snake oils, whatever you want to call it, okay? But we got to be realistic, okay? Got to be realistic. Here in Georgia, we still recommend nitrogen rates based on yield goal, okay? And so that is an opportunity, number one, to cut your inputs if you want to be realistic, right? If you got a field where the potential is not there for 3 bales, then don't put 3 bales worth of fertilizer out there, all right? Plain and simple. We can cut our inputs that way, okay? So if you got a field of June planted cotton that ain't got the potential, let's put out 2 bales worth of nitrogen, which is 75 units, okay? So let's be realistic about that stuff. And two, you put out a bunch on some of that late planted cotton, then we're going to wind up in a mess come defoliation time too. Okay, so we don't want to do that either. All right, so be realistic. Of course, more aggressive PGRs. PIX does 2 things. All right, PIX does 2 things in cotton. The first is that it keeps cotton short, and the second is that it hastens your maturity. Okay. It does 2 things. There are some other things are byproducts of that, okay? But those are the 2 things that PIX does consistently, okay? And PIX works, okay? We talked about it in the podcast, I think it was last week. It works. If it doesn't rain right after you spray it, PIX works, okay? So I pulled some data from a paper. I didn't even ask Dr. Snyder's permission, but this is some of his data. And of course, he's got 3 treatments here, a control which was not treated with PGR, okay? I don't think anybody in the room does that, okay? But that's just to show you how long it can take to mature. Then you've got a moderate PGR treatment and then an aggressive. The aggressive treatment was just 1 pre-bloom application of 8 ounces of PIX to the acre. That's 4.2% PIX product. Let's be sure we're putting out the right amount of PIX, okay? I got a call the other day from a grower. He said, man, I put out 8 ounces and it's starting to roll a little bit. And I said, well, I'd go out there and look at doing, I said, you've probably got 6X. And I said, so I'd look at doing about another 2 ounces or so. Well, then he called back and said, oh, I put out 8 ounces of 6X, like early in the season. I said, well, legally, you're done. You can't put out anymore, okay? So let's make sure we're putting out the right stuff. But at the end of the day, Dr. Snyder's aggressive program is 8 ounces at that 8 to 10 leaf stage. Is that right, Dr. Snyder? I think it was in this study. Yeah, and then you got your 12 ounces at bloom and 16 ounces at peak bloom, right? The moderate program just takes out the early application, the squaring application of PIX, okay? And really, This shows that pre-bloom application of PGR, adding that into your PICS program, shortens your season by about 5 days, okay? Again, I will say it again, 5 days means a lot in the month of October, okay? So if you got some cotton that hadn't started blooming yet, and there's a lot of people in this room that do, maybe let's go out there and think about putting a little bit of PICS on there before this cotton starts blooming, okay? Especially with some of this rain we've been catching here, there, and everywhere, right? Of course, part of being realistic is knowing when to stop, okay? Knowing when to stop, all right? Our last effective bloom day is somewhere between September 1st and 15th. Brian Hayes is in the room. He led this project a few years ago, and we got data from across the state showing that, hey, somewhere between September 1st and 15th is where that last bloom is going to result in a harvestable boll, okay? If we start chasing stuff that's blooming September 20th, it is not likely to result in a harvestable boll. Okay, so we do not need to put a lot of effort into trying to keep it, trying to protect it from insect pests and other things. Okay, so about September 15th, if you see a bloom out there, that's the last thing that has a high likelihood of making a harvestable boll in that cotton field. Okay, so we need to keep that in mind too. All right. Bottom line, okay? We feel like the crop is behind because we got behind on planting. We got our backs against the wall, so to speak, okay? But really, I think this crop is moving quick, okay? I think it was a couple weeks ago, I was over in Burke County doing a little field tour, and I had a conversation with Will Duffy, and he said that by his counts, the crop was averaging 2.2 days per node, and normally cotton does 3 days per node, okay? So it's moving fast, and we got to put our eyes on it. We got to make sure we're doing what we can to make this crop, okay? Be realistic, trust your scouting, and manage appropriately. I believe that we have potential for a fantastic cotton crop this year, and the Lord knows that we need it, okay? This picture, by the way, is in some of Dr. Roberts' plots. It was planted March 28th, isn't that right? Found an open boll last week, okay? And that cotton looks really good right now. If we don't catch a bunch of rain in the month of August, I believe it's going to make 3 bales out there. So certainly have potential with the cotton crop. We can go through defoliation stuff, just start thinking about it, right? Again, being realistic. The big thing to me is that below that red line is over 90% of the value of your crop, okay? And so let's be realistic in terms of defoliation time. If you wait to make the defoliation decision to where it's pretty obvious to you driving 70 mile an hour down the highway, you're late. All right, so let's be on time with this stuff, okay? Let's be on time. 90% of the value of that crop is below node 15, okay? So let's keep that in mind as we're getting close. Of course, get out there and check it. I already mentioned if you're driving real fast by it and it's like, oh Lord, we got to defoliate this crop, you're late, okay? Let's get out there, walk this cotton, check it. There's multiple ways to do it. We're going to talk a little bit more about that at field days and stuff like that, but certainly be in touch with your county agent. I send an email update once a week. I check the weather across the state, try to give good recommendations on products to use, things that I'm seeing, things that are working, things that aren't, okay? So let's keep that in mind as we're moving forward, okay? Final thought on the crop itself, and then I got one more thing after this. I know the situation with cotton. I've said it multiple times. Taylor said it. I think everybody said it. We know the situation. This is the cash price starting in January, okay? And all winter long, we did these meetings, and people would come up to me and they would say, Camp, how are we going to make this work? Are you going to tell me how to make money on something that costs 90 cents to make and sell it for 68 cents? And I said, I can't do that. I cannot tell you how to do that. But I got a call from one of our county agents who is here today about a grower in his county, okay? And it really got me fired up, all right? And if you listen to the podcast, I've talked about it. If you listen, I talked about it on both of the podcasts. That's how fired up I was about it, okay? He called me and said this grower was trying to push this cotton out of waterlog stress, okay? And in talking to Dr. Snyder, that is some of the most intense stress that a cotton plant can be under. You agree with me, Dr. Snyder? Waterlog stress is not good. It doesn't like it, okay? And so his retailer told him, said, all right, well, go out there with this, 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 and this. Said, okay, well, he said, go out there with pix, boron, manganese, and it was a fertilizer product that was really designed to put in a 2x2, all right, with the planter. Okay, it was heavy in phosphorus, a little bit of nitrogen, all that good stuff. Well, the first thing was that the grower threw all that stuff in the tank and then it clogged up his sprayer. Okay, so boom, it already cost you time and money right there. All right, but the other thing is that that stuff is not proven to push this crop out of waterlogged stress. Okay, we cannot afford to utilize unproven products in a year like this. And we cannot afford to do things that we are not almost guaranteed to get a return on in 2025, okay? So, how are we gonna make it work in 2025? Cut unnecessary inputs, okay? Cut unproven products. Be timely with all of the inputs that you decide to use, and then utilize the inputs that almost guarantee a return on investment, okay? And we started talking about it in production meetings. I work really hard on the production guide every year, the cotton production guide. Agents have them in the county office. If you want one, get one, because I always get too many printed. And if I need to take more to county agents, I will do it. I will deliver them. If there is something listed in the cotton production guide, there is a reason, okay? If it is not listed in the cotton production guide, there is also a reason. Y'all get what I'm saying? If it's listed in there, we've looked at it and it works. And if it's not listed in there, there's two reasons it may not be listed in there. The first is that it doesn't work, and the second is that we hadn't had time to test it, okay? So utilize things that work, okay? That's how we're gonna make it work in 2025. Last thing, the deer stuff, all right? This morning I decided I was going to talk about this, but everybody knows I've been working hard, or I feel like everybody should know that I've been working hard on this over the last 2 years, really. 2023 was kind of a wake-up call for me in terms of something's got to be done about this. And I'll tell you, we've got some really good advocates for us in the Georgia Cotton Commission, Georgia Farm Bureau, and even in the DNR, believe it or not. All right, I know that people struggle dealing with DNR, but the state deer biologist, Charlie Killmaster, really has heard us out and is trying to work with us to do some stuff to help us out, okay? One big way that he has done that is he pushed really hard for additional funding for the Georgia Hunters for the Hungry program, okay? And he did that a year ago and got it. He got $300,000 to put into the Georgia Hunters for the Hungry program, and this past year they approved another $200,000 on top of that. So they have got $500,000 to put into the Georgia Hunters for the Hungry program, okay? And whether you believe it or not, that is a success story, okay? That encourages hunters to do what they need to do, because most hunters just don't want to deal with it, all right? That's how it is. You all know that, okay? So the other thing that I think is a big success is that Charlie got on the phone with a lot of these processors that have signed up to do the Hunters for the Hungry program. And there's a list on this screen of deer processors that will take deer that are harvested on permit, okay, during the summertime, okay, and they will process them and they will donate the meat to the Hunters for the Hungry program. That is a success story for us, okay? It turns a problem for us into a positive, and that's what we want, okay? That is what we want. Now, the list is up there. There's a QR code, of course. You know, most of them have got the hours listed. Please call a processor before you show up with about 10 deer for them to take, okay? I know that, and most of them have a minimum of 5. Most of the growers in this room can get to 5 pretty quick, okay? I understand that, okay? But please call them before you just show up and drop a bunch of deer at their doorstep that were taken on permit, okay? Another thing real quick is that Charlie did also, for those of you who may lease your hunting land or lease your land out to hunters, he also did work very hard to get a special deer season approved this year. It's the weekend of October 4th, okay? And that is still during bow season, but it's a weekend where you can go out, where hunters can go out with a firearm and harvest antlerless deer only, okay? Again, big success for us. A lot of hunters say that they don't want to shoot does during the season because it messes up their bucks and whatever else. That's all fake. I mean, that's not real. Okay, so there's a lot of education that's got to be done on the hunting side too. I'll just be straight with you. But at the end of the day, this season, this one weekend in October, is a big opportunity for hunters to harvest does on their place, and really the main goal of that is to increase the utilization of the Hunters for the Hungry program. Okay, that program needs to get utilized so that we can keep getting that funding year over year. Okay, whether it's done with permits or whether it's done by hunters. Okay, those are two really big success stories. Of course, we're still working on stuff in terms of quantifying yield losses, doing simulated deer damage work, and also I've added quite a bit of repellent work to our program this year, trying to evaluate different repellents and things like that, and then teaming up with some precision ag folks who are a lot smarter than me to utilize satellite imagery to quantify deer damage, and even pairing that up with yield monitor data to get it down into groups and show how much we're losing based on yield monitors and that satellite imagery. So a lot of good stuff happening on the deer front. That's all I had really. I do, of course, always want to thank the commission and then Cotton Incorporated and that group as well.